Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast, your weekly look inside the world of fly fishing presented by Pete Tigers. If you're enjoying listening, please consider subscribing.
There was a time when you heard about new tackle from a magazine, or better still, your local tackle shop. There was something about the smell when you walked in, and once you got to know the people there was a home-from-home feel. I even used to take my then young daughter along, let her choose some flies for her fly box before I got down to the serious business of a new rod. At the time, my local store was Simpsons of Turnford, located just up the A10 from Enfield. It sold tackle for all forms of fishing, and the man in charge of the large game fishing department was Phil Barker. Today I'm catching up with him to talk about his career with Simpsons, along with the various places he has travelled with a fly rod. Phil, it's great to have you here today. Is all good with you?
Yeah, fine. I'm good. It's a pleasure to be with you. Haven't seen you for a while.
No, it's great to catch up. I remember bumping into you at in Lifton, actually. I was going to go and do some grayling fishing at the
Arundel Arms, yeah.
Yeah, and you were down there, weren't you? So it was a lovely surprise to see you down there, and then subsequently kept in touch and bumped into you at some of the shows which will come along to shortly. But are you getting out fishing? Is this time of year something that you're enjoying? Are you doing much?
I haven't been for about the last month or so because of different problems I had, but been fishing Grapham most of the year with a friend, other than my friend or my cousin, and it was fishing incredibly well at the beginning of the season. And then suddenly it switched off very quickly, and it's still not as you would expect it to be, like back end. I know that it fishes right through till Christmas. At one point, there was to me it was too much catch and release. I mean, boats are coming in. I had 35 today, and there's lots of boats catching huge amounts of fish and releasing them, which is all good fun. But it comes to a point where if you've got 30 odd boats out and they're taking sometimes 50 fish to a boat, it doesn't take long to those fish to get sulky. I'm not saying they remember being caught, but they'll get sulky and move around a bit more, perhaps. I don't know, but it certainly went from absolutely on fire to zip. We had days where we had one or two fish between us. We had one or two blanks. We never had a pull. And you try all the different methods, all the different areas. When you fish a place quite a bit, you do know areas that should produce. And you always tell a bad day, all the boats are moving about trying to find fish. But I like Grapham. It's where I really started just after it opened in the 60s. I started 68 with the fly rod, not knowing. Me and a friend, sadly lost last year. We used to go up to Grapham and thrash the water to a foam about 15 yards in front of us if we were lucky. And if we caught one or two fish, we were really pleased because there wasn't many people to ask then about fly fishing. It was in its infancy. Bob Church was fishing up there, and all the good and the great at the time, but there weren't, apart from Don Niche, I didn't know any casting instructors that you could go to. Don's of Edmonton was it was a big shop at the time, and he was about the only guy that you could ask any proper advice on. The rest of them, you just watched other people. You think, oh, they look like they're throwing a decent line. What are they doing that I'm not? And you practice, and I used to practice every lunchtime out on the field at the back of where I worked, and eventually you sort of got this. It was shooting heads then, and you would get your double haul going, and which was difficult. But it was just a question of keep trying and doing it until you did it to a point. In hindsight, it wasn't great casting, but it was effective. And so that's my soft spot for Grapham. Is that was the first proper fishery that I went to. There weren't that many small fisheries then. And of course, the advent of those opened it up to a lot more people, and a lot more people was interested in fly, catching fish on a fly, and of course there was the closed season then, so people were denied to go doing their course fishing in March, and they'd take up the fly rod for a few months till it opened again in June. That's how a lot of people got into it, and they found, I like this, I could quite like this, and it perhaps carry on into the summer rather than doing the course fishing. But of course, when that went, everything got a little bit stale, to be honest. The build up to the season was exciting. Everybody was like champing at the bit to get out and do fishing that they hadn't done for 3 months, and it's a big boom in your business as well, in the fishing tackle business. But directly the closed season was abolished, or virtually abolished. That doesn't happen anymore. It sort of plateaus off. It's not got a little rise in business, but not much. But the trout side is it's 12 months really, because there's some really good fishing in the winter on the smaller waters. Some of them fish better in the winter than they do the rest of the year. And, so you're not denied to go anywhere. You can fish whenever you like, right the way through 12 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And did you notice, because I remember when I used to come into the shop and pick your brains and you would talk about, I've been fishing here or I've been fishing there. Do you look at your fishing differently now, not working within fishing? So do you approach it slightly differently? Are you more relaxed about it, or you're not? Do you feel about it differently?
Yeah, to a point. Yeah, like when I was working, you had I used to have like day off in the week, and you'd go fishing on that day. Rain or shine, no matter what it was, in some horrendous conditions, you would go because that was your day off. When you retire, you go when you like. So you think, oh dear, oh Lord, it's terrible forecast tomorrow, and I'll leave it till later in the week. Or somebody phones up, do you fancy going? So and say, yeah, because you haven't got any restrictions on your time. So it releases you to do more fishing. Not that I do more fishing really, but I do it on my terms rather than the days that are allocated to me. So that's the main difference.
Yeah,
And
nice.
it's nice just to think that someone can phone up and say, look, do you fancy a few days down near your place? Next month if we can get booked. Yeah, there's not. Oh, I don't know whether I can get the time off. It's there. The time is there. And that's what it does, release the time to you, which you don't get when you're working.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, we talked about the shop, and in the introduction, even this, I remember walking, I can close my eyes and picture even the smell of the shop, and I mean that in a good way, of course. But walking in there, and your section was on the right, but of course, a lot of listeners may well know of Simpsons of Turnford, but how would you describe, because it was in quite I guess almost an unusual place really as well. How would you describe it to somebody who wouldn't know it?
Yeah, well, as you say, it wasn't on a main road. You could never rely on passing trade because it was the only shop round there, apart from a little grocer's shop. In fact, Simpsons of Turnford was a grocer's. It was a Londis when Jack bought the shop, and subsequent years he extended it, made it bigger, and it was a shop that people travelled to. I mean, Jack did advertise in the early days. It was a struggle. Obviously, it was only himself, but he built that business up, and really, how it took off was he embraced the carp scene. When not a lot of them they just poo-pooing it. Oh, it's a fad, but Jack could see the potential in the sales of like multiple rods and multiple reel sales, and all the accessories, bivvies, chairs. So that really kicked it off. And he had the bait, and he had all the bits and pieces, the little rigs and what have you, where not many people did. So people started to travel there for it. And that's how the name was spread. And of course, he had his own rod building program using quality blanks. It used to be Sportex blanks in the early days, and then he went to different manufacturer. But he had Kevin Maddox as a consultant, and they had the Kevin Maddox range of rods, the KM 1s, 2s, 5s, and they got quite a cult following, and they used to export through to Europe, to Water Sport Central. They used to distribute all right through the Benelux countries, and it was good business. And at the same time, he expanded the game side of it, because that was his passion, and then extended the shop, so it had 2 counters. That's when I started to work. That's when I started to work there. I come out of the motor trade, and I went, this is what I want to do. And we built it up from there, and I was there for 20 years. And it was a shop where people would come in and ask you or they'd come in for a product, and say, what are you doing with it? And they might have the wrong idea. I mean, not that you bullied them into anything. It was just a question of, like, I think you'd be better off looking at this or that, and like we could try a rod. Perhaps somebody come in for, they can try this one and that one. There was provision over the road, as you mentioned before, where you could try a rod out or lines out, and they could buy knowing that they've got the right product. And if they were a beginner, I did so many starter kits, and you could, you line up, put the lines on and the connectors, and so they can walk out of that shop, just tie a fly on the end and go fishing. Whereas I don't think you would get that on buying on the internet. You can buy all the stuff, but you wouldn't get any advice. And you might, oh yeah, I've got a new fly line. Oh, I've got no backing. But in the shop, you can sell to people, put the backing on, or they have a roller backing, and they lead the material. You can sell. You can't sell when somebody's sitting in a chair just ordering something. They might not order enough, or they might order the wrong thing. And it's a bit of a faff to send things back, obviously. But it's the way of the world now, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was thinking about when I came into the shop. And this is a great example of it and of your salesmanship. Although I never felt as though I was being sold by stealth or anything like that, because it was advice. And there was you told me about this new fly line from this company called Snowbee, and it was called the XS, and I ended up buying one. I think I bought. Did you sell Orvis rods? I'm sure I bought an Orvis TL.
Yeah.
I bought an Orvis TL
Orvis
from you, a 9'6" weight, and I remember buying that to go with it, and thought, "Wow, this is fantastic." But like you say, the ability to go out on the grass by the shop there must have made life so much easier as well, and everything that went with it. But you could go, and it certainly helped my development as a fly angler, getting information from yourself. And I might even say to you, look, I'm going down to Avington or Diva Springs or whatever, and you say, I was down there last week, this is what was, and all of those sorts of added bits were of great value to me. And there's so many stories like that coming rushing back to me at the moment. And like you say, that's started to change now. And have you noticed that consumers have sort of changed now? And I guess having stepped away from it, it must be interesting to look into it, that it feels as though it's more price orientated rather than those added things. And do you think that means that there may be room out there? Of course, we've got some of the stores out there still, and we have a local one down in Crediton who do just that sort of thing, and I can go in there and get a cup of coffee and everything else, but there's not so many. And do you think there is room for something like that more personal service, or is it now just down to internet and your ability to reach a far wider audience. Do you think there is still room for that?
I think it would be very tough for a small independent shop to turn enough money over. It depends where you are, of course. Where we are here, I mean, there's not a lot of trout fishing locally, one or two spots, but it's a big carp area and coarse fishing. So you can't ignore that, and the amount of stock you've got to carry, and like the bait scene and what have you. Like you mentioned the smell of the shop. It's all the bait flavours, and they mingle and they give off a certain smell. Some people find it okay, some people just gag on it. But you've got to you've got to really carry so much stuff to get people in, and a lot of people now they know what they want, and they'll buy it online. They don't want your advice. See, we used to sell, like you, Jack, always used to say, you sell on service. You give as good a service as you can to the customer, which we always did, um, and give them the best advice if they needed it, with the suitable equipment. But to get stocked up in a shop now that would draw people in, very, very difficult, I think. As nice as it is for the customer, as a retailer, you would be struggling. It's tough. It's a tough market. There's a lot of out there.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of local shops, and they do okay. One of them does very well, but they do a lot of internet sales as well.
Yeah.
You know, they have one of them in Hoddesdon. They have a complete department that all they do is internet sales, and they do a lot of business. But that's all. But they've also got a shop that people go in and talk. You know.
Yeah.
Which I think that the intimacy's gone, if you like, in most of these places, unless it's a small shop. If it's a bit of a big places and that, it gets a bit sterile. But people used to like to come in, have a chat.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes as well, because you rightly said that you're not in fly fishing territory as such. You're sort of straddling it, I guess, in a number of places. Yet you had a big game fishing department, and there was always people there. I'd go most Saturday mornings or every other Saturday morning, go and have a wander around and see what was happening. There were always people there. So that speaks volumes again. And that's why I kind of think about that personal service thing, or just to go in and chew the fat. And invariably you end up going and buying something anyway. But did you notice that change quickly from personal to online? Were you sort of aware of that sudden quick change of how things happen?
Not while I was at Simpsons, no. There wasn't really anything like that. There was, you could buy online, you could phone like Glasgow Angling or something that they would have a sale on, or if you wanted waders and what have you. But that wasn't really anything that we thought was a problem for your business. It didn't sort of take anything away, providing you had what people wanted. But it's I don't really know when it sort of kicked in like that with the internet. It happened quite quickly, whereas like everybody was, the internet, obviously you can just search out what you want and you find it. Whereas although we didn't have many trout fishing options around where we are, there wasn't anybody else selling game tackle. So anybody within a pretty big radius, I suppose, came to us because they knew we had a good selection of fly stuff. Whereas everybody started doing carp and the cool stuff. People had a choice; they'd just go to their nearest shop. They would come to us because we had everything they needed, or you like to think we did.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the rigors of trying to challenge the online sales at the Simpsons.
Yeah, makes sense. And I kind of liked, like I say, I remember going out there and trying a rod. It seems, talking about the internet now, that people, I'm sure will back this up, that I could recommend a rod and you might recommend a rod, and they might be different things, but there is no better thing than going out there and trying to cast the thing as well, is there, to see whether it suits you. And that must have been really beneficial for you at the time as well, mustn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because people have an idea that because it's an expensive rod, it's going to make them a better caster, or sometimes because they're a lot faster in the action, it doesn't favour someone who's just started out, and sometimes you have to talk people out of buying these super expensive rods, because it's not going to do what you think it is. Buy it by all means, because it's a great piece of kit, but I don't think it's going to make you any better. Some of the lines did. Some of the lines flattered the caster, like, as you mentioned, the XS, fantastic line. They still make it, and I still use it. I mean, I used to get dozens of different lines sent me, to try out and to comment on, to say, like, what do you think? And they were good. And yeah, could this, that, and the other. You put a report in, but I always put the excess back on to fish with, because it's one of those lines that you immediately fall in love with, in all weights. But it's like Airflow. They used to produce awful lines, dreadful lines, when Paul Burgess was in charge. Dreadful memory, like Coral Springs. But now they make fantastic lines. Absolutely. I mean, most of the competition guys, they use the Airflow stuff, and I've got a few Airflow lines, and totally different animals to what they used to be.
Yeah.
So that things do change. Tackle manufacturers have raised their game. It's like Hardy. They were very old-fashioned rods, very well made, looked nice, but couldn't compete with the American rods. And then gradually they've come into they came into the 20th century, as it was then, and bought rods out that were nice in the hand, and they could compete, and now make some wonderful rods. Whereas there's more choice now of quality tackle than there was before. It used to be one or two brands, American usually brands. They were the rods. They were the benchmark, if you like, and nobody came close. But now, everybody is producing great rods, I think, because of carbon technology, and they can make cheap rods now that were as good as Premier rods years ago. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it amazes me how they can produce a rod to sell at about £25 or £30. You think you couldn't buy a decent set of rings and a real fitting for that, and there it is, and it's reached the customer for that money, and it's gone through two or three different hands that have made money on that rod. So what they're produced for is peanuts.
Yeah,
incredible.
Yeah,
But it's good for people who's going to buy them, who don't want to spend too much money, or can't. Not everybody can afford an expensive rod. You don't have to now, because you can get kitted out completely for less than £100. I mean, fantastic value.
Yeah.
There's so much tackle available now that you can do very well for very little.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you were saying about the shop there, and the ability of people to be able to try tackle, and what you're actually giving is an biased advice. And what I mean by unbiased is that you're telling them what you think will suit them, but of course you want them to buy something. But that allows, because you have a big stronghold of different brands that you can sell, then that enables you to fit them with the best part of tackle. And I wonder now if we're in the environment that we live with, people being associated with a brand, they're only going to push that one. Whereas you were able to say, look, I think this one's good, I think that one's good, or this one will suit you. And I think that may be where we're missing that. And that comes back to where I see these things on the internet where people say, recommend me a rod, and you'll get one person's not bias, but their personal view of what they like without allowing that person to try those options. And I think that's possibly where we may be sold to in a different way, but not giving the end user that option as easily as it was previously. Does that make sense?
Yeah, mainly, as you said before, it's sold on price. A lot of things now are sold on price. You know the rod that you want or you think you want, and you just scroll around till you find someone who's doing it at the price that you're going to pay.
Mm.
I mean, in fairness, I mean, there are some places you can go and still try a rod out, like at Sportfish. Down at in their place, they've got a big lake out the back, and you can walk out on a little platform and try different lines and rods, which is quite good. But not everybody wants to travel that far. They'd rather sit in their chair and order it. And unless they've tried it, like a friend's got a rod and they say, oh, well, yeah, I tried Fred's rod, I love it, yeah, I want one. And then they just get it on price. They don't need to go and try it because they've made up their mind. But it's like with salmon rods. That's to us. I mean, in Scotland, they sell a lot of big rods, double-ended rods, because that's the sort of fishing. Well, we used to keep salmon rods to a point, but salmon fishermen usually only go 2 or 3 times a year, perhaps, and on a trip, like go up to Scotland for the week, or they go fishing in Wales, or in the UK somewhere, or they go across the island. So they didn't have a big turnaround of tackle because they didn't wear anything out. They had rods that they have for donkey's years, and reels and lines. Whereas a trout fisherman's using them every week, they're going to go through a couple of lines a year because of the usage. Whereas salmon, it was quite high priced stuff to keep, but you felt obliged to keep it for customers who needed it. You knew when the salmon seasons were starting over here, and so you sort of gauged what you kept for those sort of times, and you knew certain people only used to come to the shop once a year, twice a year, and they come in and have a spend up because they were going on holiday, and they felt they were obliged to buy something new or whatever. Things do change like that.
Mm. Yeah. And also, it's worth bearing in mind, isn't it, for stores that, they're taking the risk, like you say with salmon rods, you're taking the risk of stocking that, and you could hold it for quite some time without selling it as well.
Oh yeah,
There's quite a
yeah.
big degree of risk in that, isn't there, that people, I think,
Oh
sometimes
God, yeah.
bypass or miss.
Yeah, you buy things. It's like Able reels. We used to keep Able reels. Well, they were expensive reels, £300, £400, £500, and you're not going to sell them every week. They've just got to be there for someone who wants high performance reels, like saltwater fishermen and whatever. So you've got a lot of dead money sitting on shelves and in cabinets. Uh, and a lot of places, that's why they don't keep that sort of stock, because it's just too expensive to hold. They want to turn things around quickly, and those sort of high quality things are very slow movers unless you're going to discount them to. That's one thing with Sage. They never they wouldn't have discounting. They said it's sold as it is. If you start advertising at a discounted price, they just stopped supplying you because they didn't have to. You can't do that in this country. They're an American company, and it was their choice of who they sold to. And they said if shops don't think they can sell our product at the proper price, we'll refund them and take it back. That was so. The only way you could get a cheap sage was if, like they were quite happy for us to build on their blanks, and we used to order the blanks and all their fittings, the Struble fittings. Hopkins and Holloway used to supply their rings, so we did everything as Sage did, but we could offer it at an accepted discounted price.
Yeah.
And so you didn't. It wasn't quite so expensive to keep a big stock of sage rods. Which again, we used to sell quite a number a year, but it wasn't a day-to-day sales. It was all those expensive sales were quite slow, and it's hard to keep up like the modern rods and reels without selling the others. It was especially if a new model was coming out.
Yeah.
So, you had to be on your toes, if you like.
Nice. And that segues really nicely, because one of the last times I bumped into you, I think I was on the Sage stand at the London Fly Fishing Show, and you were there with Jack Simpson. You came over, and I remember saying it was all your fault I was standing there because of you starting that thing with me with buying Sage rods. And exactly as you say, I was going to say that my first way into them was discovering that actually I could buy a blank that you had built that was a little bit cheaper. And that gave me access. And I remember some of the adverts as well. That was one of the big things that you pushed, wasn't it, on the adverts, that you could
Sure.
build those rods there. And I think it was a 9.5-foot RPL or something like that you'd built up, it is a Sage, but was a little bit cheaper as well. And that must have opened things up quite dramatically for you, as you say, and gave access. That must have got the name out there a little bit more to a slightly wider audience as well, mustn't it?
Yeah. We sold a hell of a lot of Simpson built Sage because to look at them, they looked exactly the same. Had the Sage logo on the blanks, all it was, it would have a B on the end of it. If it was like a 9.6, like a 6-weight 9'6", and it had a B at the end of it, denoting that it was a blank and not a factory rod. But people on average would save £100 by buying a Simpsons build as against a Sage build. And then we used to supply them with the tubes and the aluminium tubes. We used to buy all the stuff from Sage, and it carried the same warranty, lifetime warranty, to the original purchaser, which is it's a great thing, really. It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
That warranty.
And how much were those? Because you say those rods were £100 off. I'm trying to think, what was a Sage then? 400, 450, something like that? Would they have been?
Yeah, £450, £500. Yeah, those 20% cheaper by having a Simpson built. We only used to build on the top range blanks because it wasn't worth it on the cheaper models, and people never used to really buy the cheaper models too much. Although they did bring some. I don't think they actually built them as they did the XPs and so forth. But they bought out an entry level for £150 or so, which decent enough rods. So it's not worth building those. Even if we could have got the blanks, it's just not viable. But it was a good saving on the expensive rods. It was, and that was as good a finish. I mean, our rod maker, Roger Hurst, did a fantastic job with all the epoxy finishes on the whippings, which they weren't really distinguishable from the factory built. That's why we like to use the Struble fittings, real fittings. And the fittings were £70. The real fittings on those rods, so they was very high quality. But say people could get into one a bit cheaper than the Sage price.
Yeah. You may or may not remember that you had a Graphite 3, and I remember because I'd come in Saturday morning, have a chat, and then if I bought something, I'd go off fishing and go and try it out, or at least go and try it in the field afterwards. But you had an 8.5 foot for a 5. I don't expect you to remember this for 1 second, but I kept coming in and it was there, and I thought, oh, shall I buy? And I didn't. And I came in one Saturday and I thought, I'm going to buy it. And I went in there and the bloody thing had gone. And neither of you told me that Emma had come in and bought it. And she bought it for me and you'd sold it to my wife. And I had this wonderful surprise one day that she said, you better have a look at this. And she'd got that for me. And that brings me on really nicely as well in the ability to part exchange. Because I guess, like you say, Sportfish and some of the other places, there's the ability to do that. But there's not, if you're buying online, that same sort of ability. And I could come in, I remember when I discovered Sage rods and was buying the blanks from you and then buying the factory builds as well, but I could come in and take a rod and you'll take it in part exchange. So I felt I was recycling that. But you had the most fantastic second-hand rack as well of tackle, didn't you? It was extraordinary.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some people used to bring the rods or reels in and say, can you sell them for us? And we'd say, yeah, put it on the rack. And their name was at the back of the ticket. And all we would charge them is I think we used to charge 20% just to cover the VAT, because directly that money goes in the till. It's VATable. So there was a cost involved, but we didn't. Sometimes we would take a rod in against another rod, like especially the expensive rods. But if somebody wanted to sell items of tackle, we had provisions for them to do so. And reels, everybody used to look at the second-hand stuff because it was quite interesting sometimes what come in. Yeah, and the cool stuff as well. It wasn't just fly stuff. It used to get rods. There'd be some coarse rods. And someone might bring in like split cane rods. Like Richard Walker Mark IV carp rod or Avon, and they used to fetch good money if they were in good condition. If they were, a guy bought a pair in once, second-hand Richard Walker Mark IV carp rods, and they were mint. And he said, I've had these since I was a teenager. He said, I saved up from a paper round and bought these rods, and he's clean them every time he went out. He'd clean them down, and they was absolutely pristine. He said, he was going on to fly fishing, funny enough. He said, I don't use these now. Somebody might want them. And they made £400 each.
Wow.
And a guy came in and he bought the pair. He saw them. He said, they're not refurbished. They're not re-whipped and nothing. I'll have both of them.
Wow.
And that took a week to sell them.
Wow.
So you can get some really enviable, desirable stuff come in on the second-hand rack.
Yeah, I remember. I think my best, that rod aside, I have a Sage reel that was made by Able at the time. I think Able were making the Sage reels, and I bought that, and I've still got it. Actually, it's up in my where I keep my fishing tackle, and I've still got that. I think that was my best. Was there ever a time that something came in? I suppose working in it is slightly different, but was there anything ever came in and you thought, oh yeah, I quite fancy that?
No, I don't think I ever bought anything that was like for myself. Thinking about it, no. I used to. When the new Sage models came out, I used to put mine on the rack. My my outgoing rods would go on the rack. I didn't want to keep them. I just, if you was using 9.5 foot, 7 weights or whatever, I thought, well, I don't want 4 of them. I just want 2. So I'd put them on the rack, and they'd soon go, and I'd put them against the cost of the new model. But I've stuck with the rods that I use now. My Sage, I haven't bought new Sage. Most of my rods are the XPs, the XP range. Fantastic. I just love them. And probably the favourite little rod is a 5-weight TCR, technical casting rod. It's super quick, and it's a lovely rod for demonstrating and showing off with. It's a super little rod. I don't use it too much at the moment, not on the reservoirs. And I've got a TCX, which was the one that replaced it, slightly slower, but another nice little rod for demonstrating with 9 foot 5 weight. It's nice. But XPs, all my others that I travel with, and the rods I use like at home, they're all XPs.
Yeah, nice.
They'd never really replaced them for me. They still make lovely rods, but you get used to things, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, you do get used to that. And I think it is a function of not working in it any longer. And it's similar for myself that I don't change rods in the way that I did. And I search out interesting or different sort of stuff so that it fits the fishing that I'm actually doing. And I think part of it, I don't know if it was the same for you. It may have been, it may not have been, that working in the shop and for myself guiding, that I felt I had to have the latest one so I could show people what that latest one was, and if they wanted to have a go with it for the day or whatever it was. Now, not doing that, I don't feel the need to do that. So it's not as important to me. So I just say, oh, it's a bamboo rod there, whatever it is, and fish that way. But this brings us nicely onto as well, you say your rods for traveling. And I remember again coming into that store and you talking about Alaska and me just sort of standing open mouthed at places that I could only just sort of dream about, that really did, and I suppose to a small degree now, felt like the back of nowhere, the real sort of untouched wilderness. And, you were seeking these places out, and bonefish as well, because I remember that. I didn't know. I was too frightened to go bone fishing for years because I was afraid the guides would scream at me too much, having read some of the books, and I was just too frightened to go. But, you've been doing this really at the forefront of these. And I know we had the artist Bob White in the magazine, and he works up in Alaska, and I happened to chat to him, and he said, hey, do you know Phil Barker? He's coming out. And I said, actually, I do really well. And you've obviously know him from there. And tell us about Alaska.
Yeah.
from when you first went there. And is it different now from when you first went there? Is there infrastructure? Have you seen a change in the fishing and the fish and everything else that went with it?
If you're talking about lodge-wise, and where you stay and the fishing, they've only improved really. I mean, the better lodges are always looking to improve the facilities and what have you. The fishing doesn't really alter. It's incredible amount of fish. I think this year in the Bristol Bay region, which is where a lot of the lodges are, the sockeye run was 71 million, and that's all done and dusted in about 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
All those fish flood into the rivers. It's a phenomenal runs of sockeye. Kings, not so many. They're in like a few million, I suppose. Colossal amount for the rivers, but not in. They don't come in shoals. And silvers at the back end of silvers, they come in. They're the last ones to come in. Not in the numbers of sockeye, but they are the aggressive ones. But all the fishing, the dry fly fishing is out of this world. for rainbows and grayling. There's char you can catch. You can catch dolivardum, which are the sea run char. You can catch dozens and dozens of sockeye. You can catch 20, 30 in a day if you wanted to. And the kings are immensely powerful. But all the rivers, the rivers never seem to alter much. You know, they're so familiar to you if you've fished them a few times. And holding areas much the same as over here. You know, there's the certain areas where they'll stop, and you can sockeye you're catching running fish, but all the others they stop, and there's certain areas. The fishing is off the scale, really. I mean, it's guaranteed catch because of the amount of fish in front of you. But the lodges, they do undergo refurbs. The lodge where I've done most of my fishing, Bristol Bay Lodge, they've just completely redone it. I haven't been back since they've completely redone all the interiors, but all their rooms and cabins, they're all en suite. So, you know, there's no sort of shower blocks or anything you've got to trudge across to, which some lodges are. And they've got 3 de Havilland Beaver planes that fly you out every day. You're going to fly somewhere different river. So the upkeep of those and the way you're looked after at the lodge makes for quite an expensive trip. But you can't get any better. You know, I've been to 2 or 3 different lodges, and they've all got their appeal. But that is somewhere you could take your wife. There's always ladies there because it's so comfortable, and it's that you don't go without anything. And you got a guide for every 2 people, and they don't fish. They just look after you, and they take you to where to find fish. They do a proper guiding job, you know. And they cook at lunchtime, like shore lunches. You know, you're eating fish that were swimming the river earlier on. You can't get it's sort of fresher than that. And they just every year they add a little bit more, so you get a bit more for the experience. And it's just a wonderful place to be. I mean, when you're on the river and you look across some stretch of tundra and you think no one ever set foot on that. What I'm looking at has never been set foot on since its creation, and it really makes the hair stand up in your neck and makes you feel very, very small and insignificant. It's 'cause it's such a huge place, but I reckon even now less than 1% has been walked on in Alaska.
Wow,
It's a monster state. Look at it on the map; it's huge. And obviously the north is frozen all the time. But down south and southwest where we fish, it's still remote. It's still that wilderness that you're looking for. You don't see other people fishing on like a couple of the rivers, a few of the lodges access, and you'll see boats on them here and there. But 4 of the venues where we go, you're the only ones there. There'll be 4 of you fishing on this whole river system. You are remote. You go around a corner, there's just you and your guide and the fish in front of you, and you catch it. Odd bears, obviously. Wildlife is phenomenal. It's a proper exciting place to be. It's very quite a spiritual place. It's if you've got a soul, it's the place to be. And we spend a couple of days in Anchorage before and after. It's a nice town to go around. There's plenty of shops and stores and restaurants and bars. And they've got, in the last few years, they've built a big big tackle store out of town, well, two of them, two big tackle stores, huge. I mean, Cabela's is one, and they got aeroplanes hanging off the ceiling, and they've got big all round the walls is all animated figures and bears and eagles and what have you. There's one with a big tank in full of trout and char. It's about 30-foot long aquarium. They're monstrous places. So, but they're interesting. You go there and you can spend half a day wandering around, and the stuff is a lot cheaper there. It starts off cheaper, and depending on the exchange rate, is how good it is to you. At the moment, it's awful.
Yeah.
But when the exchange rate is as it should be, or hopefully should be, it's you can probably save in a third on whatever you buy. And if you buy you think you're buying a pair of waders before you go, you buy them out there. You can buy the Sims waders dollars for pounds. So as I say, exchange rate makes a difference on your holiday and the lodge price, because it's all done on the dollar. So it's something you have to take into consideration, that when you book it and you think, oh, it's dollars, it's $150, that's good, and when you come to pay, it's like $135 or something. Puts £500 or £600 on the bill. But it's the same as any holiday abroad now. They're all sold on the dollar. So it's any fishing holiday. If you go to down on the Keys or wherever, Bahamas. A friend of mine, he lives in the Bahamas. Been out there a few times fishing for bonefish, and that's his favourite. Then we've done some tarpon fishing down on the Keys, and it's Alaska is better for temperature wise for me. I mean, in the summer, it's similar to our sort of summer, I suppose. You can be fishing in 70 or 80 degrees some days, but it drops quite quickly if it rains, and then it's gone, and it's the weather changes quite quickly. But it's quite temperate in the summer, and right through to the autumn, you're not fishing in like freezing cold conditions. It's comfortable fishing, whereas saltwater stuff is like, you just feel like you're in a furnace all the time, and you're sweating through your caps. And I like the sun. I can sit in the sun, but fishing in it is a bit of a pain to me. And whereas other people just love it, out on the flats, and you've got to have all your sun cream on and God knows what, because you get blistered. But it's fun to do now and again, but it's not my first choice.
Would be Alaska, and that's been 25 odd years you've been visiting. And one of the things,
mid-90s that I started to go, so it's over 25 years that I've been there, and sometimes twice a year if I've had two parties going. But I've arranged trips since, I don't know, late 90s, and just got groups together from the shop. People come in and you get chatting. Oh, I'd like to do that, and you give them the information, and we get a group together and go out. It's nice when there's a crowd of you go, if it's half a dozen people or so. And I did that for quite a number of years. And I'm just getting a group now together for 2023. Because the trouble with next year, 2022, because of all the restrictions that have been in place, a lot of the holidays that were cancelled have rolled over, and they rolled them over into 2022. So most of the prime weeks are gone. So I spoke to the lodge owner a little while ago, about a month ago, and about this, and he said, if you book now for 23, he said all the weeks are open basically. So you've got to know optimum times to go, or to especially if people haven't been before, and so that's what I'm going to do. But I'll be fishing perhaps like for a Silvers week in 23. It'll be like back end of August, and at Bristol Bay. It's quite exciting, really, to go back there because it's a great place, and look forward to getting amongst them again.
Fantastic. And would I be mad thinking, like you say, for one of the few last wilderness to catch these fish? And I get and understand the salmon aspect of it, but I'm one of these masochists that like fishing for Atlantic salmon, so I have to fish for about 3 weeks for a pull or something like that. But would I be mad thinking of
2,000 casts, is it not?
yeah. Do you think I'd be mad though going to think about, because I read about the rainbow trout and I think there's leopard trout and the grayling, and I know
Oh, yeah.
Pete Cockwell well, and he's the huge
Pete,
grayling he's found up there. So would I be mad by thinking that would be an appealing place to go for those sort of subspecies as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, quite often, if we go in the summer, like with the sockeye, you get fed up with them. You think, oh, I don't want to catch any more sockeye. I'm going to go and do some dry fly. You can fish nymphs, obviously, but a dry fly when the weather's bright. The rainbows and the grayling, they're ready risers, and it's so exciting. You see a rise, you cover it, and you catch it. You know it's going to come up again. You just give it 30 seconds. You just cover that rise, and whoop, up they come, and it's fantastic. The grayling are super, but you can do all sorts. You can fish. I fished last time I was there. We was on this river, the Agula Pack, and fishing a mouse, like a big foam. You've probably used them yourself. A big foam fly, buoyant. You just cast it out and you let it skate. No mending, just let it skate across, and they just smash it. And I had 6 in 6 casts on this mouse. Such about rainbows, 3 or 4 pounds, I suppose, and it's just fabulous. And again, on one of the other rivers, on the Good News River, where you go, there's a spot, a big flat where these big grayling hang out, and you fish these like fat alberts, they're called. It's just like a big grasshoppery type leggy thing. Again, just let it skip across these shallows, and the grayling there, they take anything. They take massive thing. You don't mess about with little tiny nymphs for those. You can put the biggest fly on you like. They're aggressive. They come up for these flies, and we've had them, I don't know, 3.5 pounds or so. Beautiful, and they're fabulous. And I prefer to do that some days than the salmon, because it's something that you don't experience anywhere else. Certainly not over here. But I know Pete Cockwell. He chased big grayling for a number of years. He went out to Great Bear Lake, and he went all over, like really, really. And in the end, he got the record. He holds the world record for the grayling. It was like 5 pounds something, a great big thing. Yeah, all credit. He really hunted it down.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast actually, and he talked about that. I visited him down at Diva, and when it was a little easier to do face-to-face interviews, and we talked about that, and he showed me the photos and everything else, and that kind
Big
of
dark fish.
yeah, that to me is really, really interesting. I guess mice patterns, I guess in North America you could probably fish them, but and New Zealand, I guess, but the chance to actually do that would be really cool. To lock horns with a 2-3 pound grayling, possibly plus, would be amazing as well. And that, I think, to me is really, really interesting.
It's not a problem. They're all about, if you want to catch them and target them, you can catch them. And it's like the Dolly Varden that come in, the sea run char. Great sport, pretty fish, and they're quite aggressive, and they're strong as hell, because usually only fishing like a 5/8 line for them, 5/8 rods, and they are tough. They are tough fish to get in, because they go up to double figures.
Wow,
great big things. But yeah, if you're fed up with catching salmon, you can fish for these other species. There's always something there to catch. Even pike.
Yeah.
In one of the lakes, the river runs out of, the pack runs out of. You go over to the far corner, and it's about I don't know, 5 foot deep, crystal clear. All these weeds growing up, and you just fish a popper, just a big flat-fronted popper, and pop it across the top, and these pike come up for it. Just smash it. They're only small. They're not very big, up to, I don't know, 3 or 4 pounds, I suppose. But they're just a good bit of fun for about an hour before you go down the river to catch what you're supposed to be catching. But yeah, there's all sorts. Because they're always hungry, the old pike. They have a bit of a lean time of it. There's not much for them to feed on. Frogs and bits and pieces, but there's no fry over there or anything.
Nice. Nice. That sounds absolutely fantastic, and you've set the scene beautifully. I think I know the answer to this. We're coming up an hour now of chatting, and I think I know the answer to this. But I think you're probably, of the guests, I often ask this question, not always, but I think you're probably one of the best positioned people to answer this question. But what is your Hall of Fame rod? Which is the one? I think you've alluded to it already, but what is your Hall of Fame rod?
As an all-rounder, I would have said Sage XP. As a personal favourite of mine, it's the little the TCR, 9 foot 5 weight TCR. But all the other rods, I've got them from 6 weights through to 10 weights, and they're XPs, 4-piece XPs, easy to carry, travel. But they're my go-to rods.
Nice.
Although I did catch a big salmon on in Sweden on the Morum on a 10-foot Simpsons reservoir rod, because we was fishing under trees. You couldn't use a big rod, fishing this pool out, and I had it was a trip that Bob Church had arranged, and Bob phoned up and asked us if me and a friend like to go with him join their party, and we was on this. The Morum is it's not a private river. There isn't any private pits there, and you're allocated a beat each day, which you're not the only ones on. It's quite a busy old river. But I had this fish on it was about, we reckoned 35 pounds. It was a huge fish. My friend Clint, he was pulling it out, tailed it out the water, and he's pulling it. He didn't think it was ever going to stop coming out the water. It was huge. It was monster. But it was the ugliest fish you've ever seen. We was over there at the wrong time, and it was as black as hell. It was, I didn't even take a picture of it. I thought, so disappointed in the condition of this fish. It's the biggest Atlantic I've caught. Plenty of 20-pounders and whatever, but this was huge. But it was an ugly bugger. It really was. The kype on them, it's nearly through the top of their head. The kypes are about 4 inches long, and it's just sort of worn through the top of their jaw and out the top of the head. But that was on a Sportex blank, so it stood the test. But
Nice.
that was before the XPs were out. Let's say.
Nice. It's been, Phil, it's been fantastic catching up. I know when things get a little bit back to normal, we've been talking about you coming to fish the tour, and we'll get that organised hopefully for next year if things get back to normal in some way, shape or form. So it'd be great to show you the stomping ground down here and see if we can catch some.
Yeah, I'd like to do a few days down there.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool. So we'll get that organised. But thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I just wanted to give listeners, what I try and do is give listeners something different content-wise. And it was, for me, it was a bit of an indulgence. It was a look down memory lane. I can remember parking up in the shop. I remember your car parked there, and walking into the store, you on the right by the stand there. And it was lovely. But to see how things used to operate in not the old world, but in the previous version of it, I guess, really, and how personal service meant so much. And I'm sure there's pockets of that still going on now, but in a different way. And it was really important to me. And I used to love, as you know, I used to be in there a lot. Whenever I could, most often, I think it was a Saturday morning or every other Saturday morning, I'd be down there, and I really loved it. And I learned a lot from just chatting with you and about, I think that's my love affair with tackle began, and used to love visiting the shop and talking with you about fishing. And like today, I've enjoyed it again. It's just like chatting in the shop, how we used to chat for a long time. It's just that I'm not buying a rod this time, so I'm sorry about that. But it's been brilliant. So thank you, Phil, so much for talking with me today. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, pleasure. I mean, in the shop, I used to love working in there, and if Jack hadn't sold the shop, I'd probably still be working in there. I wouldn't have retired. It was too much of a social thing. Yeah. No, thanks for asking me anyway.
You're welcome, mate. Well, it's lovely to catch up. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you have enjoyed this one too. There will be plenty more down the line, as always. If you're enjoying them, please consider subscribing, and there'll be some real soon. Thanks so much for listening.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.